Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rena Nine, and we begin with protests and counter-protests today in the streets of Boston. You can see crowds starting to gather around the Boston Commons right there. The demonstration was being billed as a peaceful rally for free speech. But after violence erupted 1 week ago in Charlottesville, the city is now on high alert. Local authorities are concerned that extremists like neo-Nazis and the KKK may try to attend. In response, as many as 30,000 counter-protests are expected to show up. Those protesters are also in that area. You can see that wide area stretching all the way down for blocks. DeMarco Morgan is in Boston. DeMarco, can you tell us, what have you been seeing so far?
Well, Rena, I can tell you there's hundreds of people, you said it, are starting to show up at the Boston Common right here behind me. And what I've noticed is a lot of young people on both sides when you talk about the alt-right and white supremacist groups, along with the counter-protesters as well. But we're expecting thousands. You've seen the pictures coming into our newsroom there, our studios there in New York. We're expecting thousands of people to be making their way down this street right here behind me. This is Charles Street here in Boston, coming from Roxbury, which is about 3 miles away. When you talk about security, which is so important because of what happened there in Charlottesville, Virginia, we want to point out the sanitation trucks right here that are in place just to block vehicles from even getting in this area. You have a lot of roadblocks as well. My hotel is about a block and a half away, and we had to literally walk through many road closures just to get here and sort of snake your way in. This is what you are hearing, a so-called free speech rally. We got a chance to speak with the organizer, who was just 23 years old. Remember, I talked about many of the protesters here that we've seen today are very young. The organizer of today's event is just 23 years old and a student at Pittsburgh State College. And when you think about all of the students here, Boston has dozens of schools, and that's just in the city alone. We're not even talking about the metropolitan area. But I asked him, I said, okay, so what's the whole purpose behind this event? Why did you want to continue with it, especially after what happened in Charlottesville? He said he did not want to cancel the event because he said it sort of puts a dent into their whole message, that they deserve to say what they want to say about who they want to say, and they deserve to assemble to protect their rights of free speech. And I said, okay, you got to explain just a little more. What are you talking about when you talk about protecting the rights of free speech? He said in today's society, you're talking about a lot of political correctness. There's a lot of political correctness when you talk about education, at work, you name it. You can't say anything about your coworkers. You can't talk about race. You can't talk about religion because you're fired as a result. He feels that way of speaking for your right to having the right to speak and say what you want to say is being taken away. So they're here to stand up for that side. I said, look, you have white supremacist groups who are backing your organization, who are standing behind you. He said if they start to speak hate, he's going to denounce what they're saying. But I said, hey, you know, that's sort of like double standard. You know, you're saying in one voice, you're saying you should have the right to say what you want to say, but then in the other voice, you're saying you're going to shoot them down. So a lot of dynamics going on, a lot of groups, but the counter protesters, that number is expected to be huge, and we're waiting for them to arrive.
Well, interesting to hear you say that the counter protesters are expected to outnumber there, DeMarco. The good news about Boston is the police department is well trained for large numbers and rallies. We've seen what they've done around the Boston Marathon, especially after the attacks there. But what can you tell us? What are police saying to you about what they're doing to step up security?
Well, police aren't saying much, and that's not new to situations like this. You and I have covered major events, just like the Boston Marathon. They're not saying very much about security because they don't want to tip their hand. But I can tell you, we see a police presence on some of the rooftops around here. They're on horseback. They're on bikes. They are everywhere, and that's just the ones that we can see. We're not talking about the undercover cops, that I should say, that are sort of sprinkled throughout the crowd and will be sprinkled throughout the crowd to make sure that these two groups don't come together and clash. But the mayor here, Marty Walsh, he simply said a couple of days ago at the Holocaust Memorial that was vandalized just the other night that Boston, hate does not belong here. Hate is not welcomed here in his city. And he said that the police department, along with other law enforcement officials that are assisting the Boston Police Department, they are ready and prepared for whatever is to take place.
I certainly believe that. DeMarco Morgan will check back with you throughout the afternoon. Thank you for joining us, DeMarco.